Hi, I'm Larry Richardson, your step-by-step chef. In this episode, we're going to make one of my favorite fresh-tasting dishes. It's chicken and fresh vegetables Italian style. I also like to call it chicken and vegetable Prima Vera. Now, this dish involves quite a few different vegetables, and I don't want you to be intimidated by them because all we have to do is chop them up and put them into a pan to saute. It's really that simple. And then we just chop up some chicken and prepare some garlic and herbs. So if you are willing to give this a shot, I think it's going to turn into one of your favorite step-by-step chef dishes. So come on, let's cook. Okay, so here are the ingredients we're going to use for our chicken and fresh vegetable pasta dish. First of all, we're going to use 1.5 pounds of boneless, skinless chicken breast. We're going to use 1/2 cup of chopped red onion. We're going to use 3 broccoli crowns, which will come out to 2 to 3 cups after we chop it into florets, 1 zucchini, 6 green onions, 3 celery stalks, half of a sweet red pepper, 4 cloves of garlic, 2 tablespoons of chopped basil, 2 tablespoons of chopped oregano, 2 tablespoons of chopped parsley, and 2 tablespoons of chopped rosemary. Now, if you cannot find these fresh herbs anywhere around, you're more than welcome to use a tablespoon or maybe 2, but I'd really try to stick to a tablespoon the first time through, of dried Italian seasonings. We're also going to use 2 tablespoons of salt. We're going to use 1 cup of chicken broth, and we're also going to use 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil, and we have rotini. That's my pasta of choice for this dish this time around. Now again, the coolest thing about this dish is use the freshest vegetables of this type that you can get your hands on. You can substitute out any of these. So for instance, you could use sweet onion or yellow onion instead of the red onion. You could use, yellow squash instead of zucchini. And, you can eliminate the red pepper if you like. I actually like the sweet red pepper because it adds color to the dish. So come on, let me show you how to put this together. And the first thing I want to do is prepare the vegetables for sauteing. So I have my red onion here. Just going to peel this outer skin off. It got a little bit tough. And I'm just going to cut the ends off. There we go. And then cut this into very thin slices. Now you don't want enormous pieces of vegetable that people will have to use a knife and fork with. That's why I'm cutting this nice and thin, because it is a pasta dish. And what we're going to do with these vegetables is lightly saute them. So here we go. Yep, those are nice and thin. And I'm putting them right into the dish, or the pan. It's a deep frying pan that I'm going to use to saute them. And here's our red onion. I'm just coring it. Make sure you get rid of all the seeds and this white core. And all these vegetables have been pre-washed. And also with the red pepper, I'm just putting it into kind of thin slices. And then I'm going to slice it into 3 segments. Okay. Here we go. And that's it. So those are nice bite-sized pieces. And you can cut these vegetables smaller if you want. I just like to have this as a robust dish, a very hearty dish. Next up we'll do our celery. And these are nice, slim little pieces of celery. And the celery adds a wonderful crispness to this dish. And next up comes our zucchini. Just cutting off both ends. And cut it in half. And what I want to do is, I want to put these pieces into halves. And then a nice thin cut to it. I love vegetables. And here's our green onion. Get rid of these parts. You don't want those tentacles in your dinner. And then just give these little, you can see kind of little segments. And if you have any like worn out looking sprigs, you know, if you have any sprigs that look really worn out, then just throw those away. Peel them off and throw them away. You don't want to put anything into this that doesn't look fresh. And let's do our broccoli. I'm just cutting off the stemmy part. You don't really want a lot of that in it. And then breaking off the branches, and then we'll cut these down a little bit too. Just a bit more core. And you can save this core. It makes a really good coleslaw, believe it or not, if you can sliver that up with some onions and carrots, and you know, combine that with some mayo and other ingredients. It's amazing what you can do with broccoli. And now I'm just taking each of these and cutting it into quarters. And then these little ones, they can just go into halves. And if they're small enough, you can certainly just throw them right in. Like this one, I'm not going to cut that one up. That's a good one too. Again, we're shooting for bite size. We don't want you to have to use a knife and a fork to cut this up on the pasta. And it looks like there's a lot of vegetables here, and there really is. But once we start to saute, you'll see the broccoli gets smaller and it doesn't take up as much volume as you see in the pan when it's all fresh. Okay, and there we go. Now we're going to take care of the herbs in the chicken, and they actually cook together with the garlic. And here are the herbs. And I just want to give these a little bit of a mince. And again, one of the joys of cooking is having access to fresh herbs. If you don't have a store nearby that has fresh herbs, then take a look at a greenhouse or like a home improvement store, or even your grocery store, because they may have these plants. And I find buying them by the plant, if you live in an area where you have a moderate amount of sunshine, that they'll grow quite nice, and you'll have a nice steady supply of all these different herbs. So this is the basil that I'm chopping first, and I do grow this myself. And again, if you can't get access to fresh herbs, and I've certainly lived in areas like that, you can either plant them by seed, or you're welcome to use dried spices like dried Italian seasonings. And a teaspoon of dried Italian seasoning goes a long way. So make sure you experiment before you go overboard with it, because anything you add to a dish, it's there. It's there for life. So, I mean, it's there until you eat it, really. So you don't want to overdo it your first time through. And then kind of like take a good long time to taste the food that you made. And then you can modify the recipe and decide if you want more or less of any of these ingredients, including the Italian spices. Because really what we're shooting for is something that tastes good to you, your family, and your friends. Anything beyond that, I mean, why bother? It's really about taste and somewhat about presentation. You want it to look good, but ultimately I want dishes that taste just perfectly delicious, and the fresher the better. Now this oregano that I've grown, it's a little bit tender, so it's not as easy to take the leaves off of the stem. Normally with oregano you can just pick it and go against the grain of the stem and the leaves fall right off. But this is a little sparse. To tell you the truth, it's winter time, so I'm not getting the thickness of leaves that I normally would with oregano. And I'm removing the stems as much as I can because personally I don't like to hit stems. I think it's a little bit jarring when you're eating a dish and all of a sudden you're eating a stick. So I try to get the herbs off the stems as much as I can. I don't worry about this as much in a dish that's going to cook all day because the stems just get absorbed into it. Okay, and then here's our parsley. I'm just taking that right off the stem. And here's our rosemary. And this plant is very fresh and it is cooperating. So I can actually drag my fingers backwards on the stem and the leaves come right off. And there we go. Now I'm just going to mince this a little bit. And the reason that I cook the chicken with the herbs and the garlic is too often I get dishes out where the chicken tastes like an afterthought, like it was plunked in later in the process. And I want the chicken to have a distinct flavor of its own. And, you know, I'm going to add the herbs a little bit later in the chicken browning process, but I do find that it makes the chicken stand out. It gives the chicken its own personality, instead of it tasting like a plain piece of chicken thrown into the sauce after it was already made. Okay, there's our herbs all minced up. And then I'm going to crush our garlic right into the herbs, because again, this is going to be thrown in with the chicken toward the end of the browning process. Now, if you don't have a garlic crusher, some people are really good at taking their knife and doing this to it, and it seems to crush it pretty well. You can also mince the garlic if you want. Personally, I like to use these garlic crushers. They're not that expensive, and I use a lot of garlic in my cooking, so I easily make my money back. And what it does is it separates the garlic clove wrapper and lets the garlic flesh go right through to the dish. And the last thing we're going to do in terms of prep work is chop up the chicken, and then we'll be ready to start cooking. And again, we're shooting for bite-sized pieces. It is a pasta dish. I don't want my guests to have to spend a lot of time with a knife cutting the dishes in, cutting the ingredients in their pasta. That's no fun. So we're just going to slice this into the chicken into very thin slices, and then we're going to slice them even smaller than that. So I'd say about, inch square pieces is perfect. That's a perfect bite-sized piece. And when we do this, it melds so much better. The chicken melds so much better with the vegetables in our vegetable sauce. It just tastes delicious this way. And it also can easily be eaten with the pasta of your choice without, again, people having to deal with big chunks of meat. So that's our first chicken breast. I know that watching me cut meat is like watching somebody watch paint dry. So I'm going to cut the other chicken breast the same size, and then I will meet you over at the stove in a couple of minutes. So here is our vegetable pan. Now I have this heating at just a notch over medium heat because we're going to do a quick saute. I'm adding my tablespoon of olive oil. And actually, you know, I have so many vegetables here, I think I'm going to add 2 tablespoons. There we go. And I'm going to stir that in. And what we're going to do is saute. We just want the onions to start to look a little bit clear. The zucchini too, and the peppers, and that'll tell us that our saute process is done. We don't want to burn them. We don't want to overcook them so they're limp. We want them to have a little bit of crunch left for when we add the chicken in. But again, this is over medium heat. Okay, and while that gets rolling, we're going to go over and start cooking our chicken. And here's our chicken pan, and it has preheated at medium. And I'm just adding 1 tablespoon of olive oil. There we go, to coat the bottom of the pan. Here's the chicken. Let's just get that oil moving a little bit. There's the chicken right into it. And we're just going to brown the chicken. And the reason I like to cook the chicken separately of the vegetables is I want to make sure, absolutely certain, that the chicken is well cooked before I put in with the vegetables. Sometimes if you cook chicken with a lot of vegetables at the same time and you're not working with a wok of any sort, it's hard to tell whether the chicken is cooked all the way through, and you may end up with some raw pieces, and you may end up with some pieces that are overcooked. So I just like to start them out separately. And we'll just keep an eye on that. Just give it a good stir every now and then. And then, like I told you, once the chicken is pretty much cooked through, then we're going to put the garlic and the herbs in with it. And this is about 5 minutes later. You can see that the chicken's cooking nicely. I'm turning it over. Getting some nice brownness to it in spots. And we'll cook the other side of it. And then we'll add our garlic and herbs and give it a little bit more of a browning. And here are the vegetables. After about 6 minutes, they're really starting to saute. You can see the onions are just starting to turn clear. And they look scrumptious. And now our chicken is still browning quite nicely. And I'm just stirring in the herbs and the onions. And then I'm going to add about a half a teaspoon of salt. Wow, that already smells delicious. And I don't want the garlic to caramelize or the herbs to burn. So I'm just making sure that the chicken is cooked through, the ingredients are mixed together. This will take about 2 minutes. And the chicken's also going to cook a little bit with the vegetables when I add the broth, because they're all going to heat up together. So I don't really have to worry about any issues with the chicken not being cooked. We've already done a good job of browning it up. Wow, that smells good. I love garlic and herbs. And now that our vegetables appear sauteed enough, I'm going to add our 2 cups of broth. This is chicken broth. Now, I usually make my own broth, by boiling a chicken and removing the fat from it, but I didn't have that kind of time, and often we don't when we're cooking. So I'm just adding the store-bought broth. And I'm leaving it on just above medium heat to get the broth nice and hot, and then I'll be dropping the chicken into it. And I'm going to add another half teaspoon or so of salt to this. There we go. Oops. And again, I don't like to oversalt these dishes because I know people will want to season them to their own taste at the table. And our chicken is all ready to go in. And that's going to add some nice flavor to this dish too. And I'm just going to stir the chicken in. Wow, I can smell the garlic and the herbs. And then I don't want to get this boiling. I don't want to get it too rolling because it'll overcook our vegetables. I just want to get the whole dish nice and hot and combined. That's why I'm not putting the broth up to high by any means. And at this point, I started the rotini water. The rotini I bought takes 11 minutes to cook, so I'm trying to time it out with what's reasonable for the vegetable dish. So right now I'm going to start cooking the rotini. Okay, so the chicken and the vegetables, again, I don't want them to boil, I don't want them to overcook, I just want them to warm up. So if it starts to simmer, if you start to see bubbles, then turn the heat way down. So congratulations, look at what you just did. You just made chicken with fresh vegetables. Basically, it's a pasta Prima Vera, and it is delicious. Now you can serve this with red pepper flakes on the side for people who like it spicy. It also tastes delicious with a good Parmesan cheese sprinkled onto it. I mean, think of the different ways that you'd like to make this to your taste. This is the way I like it. Now, if you go to my website, stepbystepchef.com, you're going to find a printable version of this recipe, along with videos and printable versions of dozens and dozens of other recipes. Again, that's at stepbystepchef.com. My name is Larry Richardson. I am your Step by Step Chef, and I'll see you in the next episode.